theyeshiva.net.
Okay, my dear friends, have a beautiful morning. It should be a great day for us and for the whole world, a day of healing and a day of recovery. Please open up your Gemara's Masechta Megillah, Daf Tez Zayin Amud Beis. This is the last page of the first chapter of Masechta Megillah. And if you don't have a Gemarah in front of you, you could take from your bookcase. And if you don't have one in your bookcase, if you go to theyeshiva.net, you'll see on the top of the homepage there's a banner. It says Gemarah Tuesday. Open it up, and when you click on it, you will see a source sheet on the top and a PDF on the bottom where you can follow inside. Where are we? We are Daf Tez Zayin Amud Beis, in the middle of the page. You see there are narrow lines and there are wide lines. We are on the wide lines, the third line from the wide lines. You see the third line from the wide lines. If you look at the wide lines, go from top to bottom and go to line number 3. It starts off with the words He'ech yachel lechabes asara neiros, and we are holding by the words La Yehudim. La Yehudim. The Gemara has diverted a little bit here to discuss the gifts that Yosef gave Binyamin as a metaphor, as a symbol for the future, what the future will hold for Binyamin in the days of Mordechai and Esther, who were descendants of the tribe of Binyamin. Continue to discuss the relationship between Yosef and Binyamin and Yosef and his brothers, all in this context, which the truth is that, if you remember the shir from Thursday and Friday, we spoke how Yosef was really the progenitor of Mordechai. So that's why I don't think these ideas here are just coming in randomly, but they're very essential to the Megillah, because Mordechai was really following Yosef's example, because he was the first Jewish prime minister, and Mordechai was another Jewish prime minister in later generations. And both of them were prime ministers not of small kings, but of superpowers. Egypt in its time was a superpower, if I could use that expression. And Persia, during the times of Ahasuerus, was also a superpower. So now the Gemara continues back to that famous verse. And it's a famous verse because, of course, we say it every single Motzei Shabbos in the Havdalah. And it comes from the Megillah Esther, chapter 8, verse 16. Perek Ches, Pasuk Tezayin. La Yehudim, Hay Sa'ira, V'simcha, V'sasayin, V'ikar. For the Jewish people, there was light and joy and celebration and glory. That's the expression of the Megillah. And it's such a precious pasuk. It's one of the few verses of the Megillah that the whole congregation says out loud before the one who reads the Megillah. La Yehudim ha'isa'ira v'simcha v'sasim v'ikar. Amar Rabbi Yehuda says, when it says the Jewish people had light, it refers to Torah. They had Torah. The pasuk says in Mishlei, chapter 6, Proverbs 6, Kiner mitzvah v'Torah oir. A mitzvah is a candle and Torah is light. So here we see that the Tanakh refers to Torah as a source of light. Its Torah is light. It's oir. It brings light. So when it says La Yehudim ha'isa oira, it means zu Torah. Simcha ze Yom Tov. When it says the Jewish people experience Simcha, this represents Yom Tov, a Jewish holiday, a Jewish festival. The pasuk says in Parshas Re'eh, Deuteronomy 16, Dvarim Perek Tazayin, V'samachta b'chagecha. You should rejoice during your festivals, during your holidays. So we see that Simcha by the Jewish people is associated with Yom Tov. When it says La Yehudim ha'isa oira is Torah, and Simcha is Yom Tov. Sasayin zumila. Jubilation or celebration is milah, circumcision, a bris. The pasuk says in Tehillim, Psalms chapter 119, Kuf Yetez, Sas anoichi al imrasecha k'moitzi shalorav. I celebrate, I rejoice over your words, over your sayings, like somebody who has found tremendous amount of spoil, booty in war. K'moitzi shalorav. Where do you see here milah? It says Sas anoichi al imrasecha. So Rashi makes a comment and he tells us This is Rashi on the first column, on the right column. Yeah, Rashi says, I'm going to read. Oyrezu Torah shegozer alei and Haman shall ask b'Torah. Haman made a decree. Doesn't say this in the Megillah, but Haman made a decree they should not learn Torah. So now, when they were saved from Haman, the Jews had Aria. They had Torah because Haman is gone. Next, Zeu Yom Tov kimu aleim Yomim Tovim. The Jewish people accepted upon themselves Yomim Tovim. Purim, of course, and all the other holidays. Zumila, Val Kol Eila Gazar. You see, Haman decreed on all these things, on Torah, on Yom Tov, and on Bris. He didn't want Jews to have a Bris. So now, Jews had Torah, they had Yom Tov, and they had a Bris. Sasa Noichi Alim Rasecha, Zumila Shenitna B'maimer V'loi B'dibur, Vayomer Hashem Al Avram V'atas Bris Tishma. Usually, mitzvahs come with the prefix of Dibur, Vayedaber Hashem, God spoke. But Milah, circumcision, Hashem tells Avram, Vayomer Hashem el Avram, in Parshas Lech Lecha. God spoke to Avram, he said, instead of spoken, it says he said, Vayomer, you should watch my covenant. So it doesn't say here the word Vayedaber, but Vayomer. So when it says in Tehillim, Sasa Noichi al Imra Secha, I'm celebrating your Imra, not your Dibur, your Vayomer, it's referring to Milah. Milah is called Sasa. Why would you associate this with this pasuk in Tehillim? He says, I'm celebrating your sayings. How do you know it's Milah? So Rashi says, we also see that David HaMelech rejoiced with the bris. Shenemar, it says, Lam Natseach al Hashminis. In Tehillim chapter Vav, it says, Lam Natseach, to a choir master, celebrating the 8th. What's the 8th? So the Gemara says, B'shah, K'shahaya b'beis HaMerchis v'ra atzmei b'loi Torah b'loi mitzvahs, Kivon shenistakel b'milah samach. Chazal tell us a very fascinating story, and that is, the Gemara says that once David was in a bathing house, and he felt that he is bare, he's stripped from any good virtue, any good mitzvah. The Gemara says then he saw that he has a bris, nistakel b'milah, and he felt simcha. So he said, Sasa noichi al imrasecha, I'm rejoicing with milah. Finally, v'yikar elu tefillin, glorious tefillin. V'cheinu oimer, the pasuk says in Parshas Kisavoy, v'rog Dvarim chapter 28, v'rog chol amei haaretz ki shem Hashem nikra alecha v'yaru mimeka. And all the nations of the world will see that God's name is called upon you, is conferred upon you, and they will fear you. The Tanya, we have a Braisa, Rebbe Lezer Hagadol Omer. Rebbe Lezer the Great said, Elu tefillin shabarosh. This is referring to tefillin in the head, on the head. When it says all the nations will see that the name of Hashem is conferred upon you, where will they see it? Where do they see that the name of Hashem is on you? So Rebbe Lezer said, Rebbe Lezer HaGadol said, this is tefillin shabarosh, because tefillin has Hashem's name on it, and it has on it, we have the shin on the tefillin shel rosh, and of course you have also the inside, the tefillin is Hashem's name, but even on the outside, and everybody sees it, tefillin shel rosh protrudes, it's conspicuous, and when they see the tefillin on the Jewish people, so v'yaru mimeka, this causes an awe and a reverence to respect the Jewish people. So when it says v'yikar, the Jews had glory, what does it mean they had glory? What does it mean they had glory? They had covet, they had respect. What does it mean? It means that they had tefillin. They had tefillin. Just a very interesting note in history, it's I think good to mention. During the weeks and months, during the weeks before the 6-Day War, if you're familiar with the history of the 6-Day War, there was absolute dread in Israel. Absolute dread. Because the Arab countries vowed there's going to be another Auschwitz. Or I think King Hussein said we're going to throw all the Jews into the sea, into the Mediterranean Sea. And there were 3 million Jews in Israel, and the Arab countries had Russia backing them, and you had 7 countries who were ready to fight Israel, and you only had one little tiny Israel, and it wasn't even Israel today. It was mamish the size of Dallas International Airport. In some points, Israel was 9 miles wide. 9 miles wide, a country. Yeah? That's here in my neighborhood in Monsey. A few neighborhoods in Monsey. A whole nation. And they had to protect it. They prepared 10,000 body bags. They consecrated parks and fields for cemeteries because they thought they're going to win, but not without a tremendous amounts of casualties. And the Prime Minister of Israel, Levi Eshkol, got on the radio to calm down the Jews of Israel, like a Prime Minister. And what happened? he broke down in the middle of the speech. So you can understand that did not have a soothing impact on the nation of Israel. Anyway, whoever remembers it knows there was dread and fear. 20 years after Auschwitz, the country was filled with Holocaust survivors. This is 1967. 22 years after Auschwitz, they were not ready for another Auschwitz, another 3 million Jews. It was beyond horrible and scary. And at that time, and this is really an incredible moment in history, and perhaps one of his great legacies, the Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory then came out and he quoted this Gemara, that V'ro kol amei haaretz kishem Hashem nikra lecha v'yarim eka elu tefillin sheberosh. And he then started this, what became a famous Miftzah Tefillin, the Tefillin campaign, that every single Jew should put on tefillin at least once, even Jews who don't put on tefillin, and to get to every Israeli soldier to put on tefillin. And the whole scene, the famous scene of Chabadniks putting on tefillin at the Kaisel and everywhere, started then, right before the 6-day war, a few weeks before. And the Rebbe felt genuinely that this is the truth, that when the Jews have the power of tefillin, it has a tremendous spiritual power, not just in heaven, but on earth. Elu tefillin sheberosh. So this is the glory. What's the glory? It says, La Yehudim Isa Aira is Torah, Simcha is Yom Tov, Sasan is Bris Milah, and finally Yikar, glory was tefillin. Rashi says Haman outlawed all of them, and now when Haman was defeated, it all came back to the Jewish people. Another very interesting thing to share is when the Baal HaTanya, the Alter Rebbe, was arrested in 1798. The Russian, they came to his home. He lived in a city called Lyozhne, a little town, little village, a little city in Belarus. It's right near Russia, right near Lithuania, very close to Lithuania, Belarus, Lyozhne. And he was davening. They came in the morning. Now, he was accused of treason, and they took him in a black wagon that was reserved for people who committed treason, who usually were given the death penalty. So this was a very scary accusation. It wasn't some white-collar crime that he didn't pay taxes. He was accused of rebelliousness against the Tsarist regime. It was very serious. And when they came to take him, it was a day after Sukkot, 1798. Tovkuf Nuntes, yeah. And he was sitting and davening. And the officials who came in to arrest him saw him in tefillin. And they left. He made with his hand and they left. They came back later. So there was a chassid there, and he asked the Baal HaTanya, why did they leave you? What happened? What did you do? So he said, the Gemara says, when they see tefillin, they see that God's name is on you and they're scared of you, so they left. So this man, his name was Rabbi Yaakov, says to Baal HaTanya, I put on tefillin and nobody's scared of me. I put on tefillin and nobody's scared of me. So the Baal HaTanya said, instantaneously, he says, the Gemara says, take a look at the words, Rebbe Lezer HaGadol Omer, Elu tefillin shebirosh. Is that the proper expression? It should have said, Elu tefillin she'al harosh. The tefillin is on the head. Birosh means the tefillin is in the head. He said it's not enough for the tefillin to be on top of the head. You need the tefillin to be in the head. Elu tefillin shebirosh. The tefillin is in the head. He says, you have the tefillin on top of your head. You need that the tefillin should be inside the head, which of course means that the consciousness of what the tefillin represents, it's not enough that it's on top of me. Elu tefillin sheberosh. When the Jew becomes the tefillin, the Jew becomes an ambassador of the divine, the world respects him. So this is what the Gemara says. Now, obviously, there's a famous question of the Sfas Emes. He says, why doesn't the pasuk say it? It should have said, La Yehudim Hoisa Torah, V'Yom Tov, Umila, Utfilin. Just say it. That's not what you say. You say, La Yehudim Hoisa Oira, V'Simcha, V'Sasim, V'Kar. And the Gemara has to say, oh, by the way, let me tell you what it means. Rabbi Yehuda says, it doesn't mean light, it means Torah, it doesn't mean Simcha, it means Yom Tov, it doesn't mean Sasim, it means a bris, doesn't mean glory, it means Tefillin. Just say it. Say it. Good question. Sfas Emes asked this question. And he gives a very beautiful answer. And he says, no, that was the miracle. The miracle of the time was that the Jewish people, who many of them were assimilated, And many of them fell prey to the lure of Achashverosh's palace and to the parties and to the feasts and to the opportunities for assimilation and integration, because Persia, relatively speaking, for those days was pretty tolerant of other religions and tribes and other minorities, and a nation that has bowed down to the idols of Nebuchadnezzar and so forth. At this point, what was the miracle? The miracle was that the Jewish people felt and experienced with every bone of their body that what is real light is Torah. And what is real joy is Yom Tov. And what is real celebration is a bris. And what is real glory is tefillin. It doesn't say La Yehudim Haisa Torah ve'Yom Tov. That would be missing the point. The miracle was that the Jewish people understood, what does it mean to have light in your life? It means that you have Torah. And what does it mean to have joy in your life? It means that you have Yom Tov. And the same is true with celebration, and the same is true with glory as a bris milah and tefillin. This is the Sfas Emes. I want to just give a little bit of a little bit of a deeper interpretation, very briefly, to these four statements, because really this captures a fundamental idea in Judaism, not only relative to Purim or relative to or Yom Tov, but it's really it's four paradigms of how Jews understand history. And I guess it's very relevant today as well. I'm going to be very brief because really this is a very profound discussion and it could be a whole lecture, but I'm just going to say it briefly because I want to move on as well. The Gemara, whenever you see such a Gemara, you have to ask a question. And I always point this out in my shiurim. Why are you giving me an interpretation for the verse? It's a very nice verse. The Jews had light and joy and celebration and glory. Beautiful. I like it. We say, no, you have to be searching for something. There's a problem here. There's an issue here. What is the issue here? So you could say on one level, the Gemara is bothered by these redundancies. There was light and there was joy and there's celebration and there's glory. Like, what's the meaning? What's the meaning of every one of the words? That's one possible interpretation. Why does it say simcha? Why does it say sasain? What is the meaning of every word? Is it not redundant? What is the definition? So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda gives us this interpretation. Now, Rashi gave a very lovely interpretation, and Rashi said that Haman did not like these four mitzvahs. Why did he not like these four mitzvahs? Rashi says he got rid of Torah, he got to get rid of Yom Tov, bris, and tefillin. Why these four mitzvahs? The Marsha says because these four mitzvahs represent the covenant between Hashem and the Jewish people. The Torah is called Edus. It's testimony of the covenant, of the relationship. The same is true with Yom Tov and Shabbos. Shabbos and Yom Tov here work together. Yom Tov is called Shabbos, Shabbos is called Yom Tov. It says, Oisi beini ubeinechem, it's a sign between you and me, just like the Torah is called Edus. Again, it's a testimony for the relationship. Bris also is the covenant that represents our relationship. And the same is true with tefillin. It says, La'ois al yadcha, it's a sign on your hand, which is why on Shabbos you don't put on tefillin, because we already have the sign of Shabbos. These four things about the relationship between the Jewish people and God, Haman was very bothered by, and that's why he decreed them, and that's the literal interpretation of the Gemara. But the Gemara is also bothered by something deeper, and that is, when it says, La Yehudim Ha'isa'ira v'simcha v'sasim v'ikar, it means that the Jews really experience light and joy and celebration and glory. And there's a question here. The question is how? Yes, their lives were saved, but they knew very well that Achashverosh was an anti-Semite. And they knew very, very well that they are under his rule. And they knew very, very well that they're still not in their own country and they don't have their own independence and they're still subject to his whim, to his impulses, which is why Mordechai had to be a prime minister and remain a prime minister. They knew very, very well what we learned before, that Achashverosh hated the Jews as much as Haman, and they knew very, very well that Haman killed Vashti, he killed his wife, and he made a decree against every single Jew to get killed. By the grace of God and the help of Esther and Mordechai, they were saved. They were still very vulnerable. Yes, they were having good days. But the question is, how can they have real light and real joy and real celebration and real glory when they were still completely vulnerable? They didn't have Mashiach. They didn't have a Geula. The Gemara said earlier on Daf Yadalu, we don't say Halal on Purim. Why not? Because we are slaves of Achashverosh. And in Halal it says, Halalu Avdei Hashem. We learned earlier this morning in the Maimon, the Medrash says, a man kept on lighting a candle after candle after candle in the middle of the night, and it was extinguished. And then he said, finally, let me wait for the day When the sun comes up, I'll have light. The candle is being extinguished. The Jews have Geula after Geula after Geula, but then they're back in exile, including Persian Geula. They were back in exile soon. The Persians were defeated, the Greeks took over, and the Jews were again enslaved and subjugated. You had the Hanukkah story, and then they were liberated. You had the Romans. So the Jews say, enough with the candles. We want the Geula Shlema. We want the sun, not the candles. We want Mashiach. So how can they have real Oira, Simcha, Sas, and Vikar in a vulnerable state? In a state where they were on top of the game, but they knew that this might not last. There could be another Haman comes around. Achashverosh himself can change his mind. The guy is a flipper. The guy flips, not real estate. Maybe that too, but the guy flips his mind. Today he's Azay, tomorrow he's Azay, the next day he's Azay. He gets drunk, he kills his own wife. The Gemara says, Melech Havchefon. He was always changing his mind, and he was insecure and paranoid, which is never good for leadership. Good question. This is what bothers the Gemara. On this, Rabbi Yehuda says, let me give you the recipe that the Jewish people had at that time that gave them the ability to have real light and real joy and real celebration and real glory. The first thing is Eira Zu Torah. When a Jew has Torah to guide, so Torah becomes the light of life, and it sheds light on every situation. And when it sheds light on every situation, a person understands that they are never in a state of complete alienation or despair or hopelessness, because Torah reveals the purpose and the divine meaning in every moment, in every experience, and every encounter. So even though the Jews were in exile, and they remained in exile, but because they had the Torah to guide them, it gave meaning in the experience. They understood they're there for a purpose. They're there on a mission. They're there for cleansing. They're there for transformation. They're there to elevate the divine sparks. But there is purpose in every moment. A Jew who lives with Torah, even if there's a dark day, it's not fully dark. Why? Because I may not have the full answers, and I may not have the situation I would have preferred, but I have perspective. I have light, how to look at it, how to deal with it. What should my response be? And that's an incredible gift to have in life. Eira Zu Torah. When a person really lives with Torah, every situation has meaning. There's no room for helplessness, for hopelessness, for helplessness, for despair, for dejection, for melancholy, for depression. Because you know that there is meaning here. There is purpose. There is opportunity. There is a mission. It's not about you were just being abandoned. You were abandoned and rejected just to random forces. Even in the most difficult moments in Golus, Jews can have light in their life, clarity in their life, perspective in their life. Next to Simcha, joy. And what is joy? He says joy is Yom Tov. How can a person have joy in life? How can a person really have joy in life? You would think, I can follow my physical instincts. Whatever my body wants, I do. But then my soul is depressed. Everybody knows. I could fulfill all my cravings, eat whatever I want, go wherever I want, do whatever I want. Not now, but at other times. But then your internal conscience is not happy. But you follow your soul, and then your body is frustrated. So he says, Simcha is a Yom Tov. The blueprint for Simcha is Yom Tov. The halacha by Yom Tov was, V'samachta b'chagecha, but how? The Gemara says, Ein Simcha ela b'basar, Ein Simcha ela b'yayin. Time of the Beis HaMikdash, you had to eat meat, and you had to drink wine. Until today, we still have yayin. We don't have the meat of the Beis HaMikdash, of the karbonas. This means that the Simcha of Yom Tov was not just spiritual. The Simcha of Yom Tov was also physical. You couldn't fulfill it if you didn't drink wine, if you don't drink wine, if you don't eat meat. What does this mean? What it means is that Yom Tov reveals to a Jew that the body and the soul are not enemies. The body and the soul just serve God in two different ways. But because they both come from one source, from one identity, which is Hashem, so the physical is really just an opportunity to serve and connect to God, just like the spiritual. Don't look as your body and your soul as two separate enemies with two different agendas. They're completely one, because they come from one God, and therefore they're both equal vehicles to connect to the divinity. They just do it in different ways, and it's manifested in different ways. When you can develop this real philosophy in life, there could be true simcha of the soul and the body together. Then there's something called sasain. What's sasain? Sasain is not revealed joy, but concealed joy. Zemila. What's mila? What's mila? A bris milah hurts. It's a surgery. It's a surgery. The child is crying. And yet, we call it sasain, celebration. It's not revealed joy. It's not revealed joy. It's hidden joy, because when somebody's going through a surgery, it's not exciting. It's not like, oh, this is awesome, this is wonderful. It hurts. And yet, they call it sasan. The Jew says sasan noichelem rasecha. Why? Because when a Jew goes through any pain in life, you have to know it's part of a bris. It's part of your relationship with the divine. There's no such a thing. You were abandoned, you were neglected, he doesn't care about you, he just threw you to the wolves. What's a bris? A bris has pain in it. But through this, the Jew becomes one with God. Every experience in life, even a painful surgery, its purpose is ultimately to make you one, to make you whole, make you one with your true self, which your true self is the source of everything, which is the infinity. And finally, Yikar, a person wants glory and dignity. How can the Jewish people have dignity in Gullus? You would think, how does a Jew have dignity? If he appeases the boss, if he appeases Achashverosh, if he surrenders, if he's mediocre, if he hides his true identity, then they're going to like him. That's how you have glory. It says, V'yikar elu tefillin. If a Jew wants glory, he or she must be proud of their Jewishness. That is what evokes the respect and the awe of the nations of the world. The world respects Jews who respect Judaism. The world is embarrassed by Jews who are embarrassed by Judaism. So you want light in life, Torah. You want simcha in life, learn the lessons of Yom Tov. You want sasin in life, that even if the joy is concealed, in every moment there's an inner feeling of celebration, even if it's not evident and positive on the outside, learn from the bris. And if you want real glory and you want dignity, elu tefillin, it's the secret of tefillin, where they wore the tefillin on their head, and this triggers the respect of the non-Jewish world. That's how Rabbi Yehuda explains how there could be Aria and Simcha and Sasain and Yikar in life. Says the Gemara weiter. 845-777-4747. It was said that Haman outlawed several aspects of Yiddishkeit, including learning. Yet we see that Mordechai was teaching the halachas of the Omer when Haman came to get him. Looks like they disobeyed. Yes, you can say that again. Mordechai was teaching, and perhaps we learned earlier that Mordechai told the sages they should run away when Haman came. Maybe part of it was he shouldn't catch them learning, because then he will have a very good excuse to kill all of them, not just on the date designated for extermination, but even 11 months earlier, because they're disobeying the law. So that may add to the reason that Mordechai told them all to run away, because Haman would have a very good excuse to kill them. Says the Gemara weiter, we all know from the Megillah that the Jewish people had to fight, and they had to fight their enemies, and they got permission to fight their enemies, and they killed in Shushan 500 people who were Amalekites, who wanted to kill the Jews, and the 10 sons of Haman. So the pasuk in the Megillah says, he continues, you see where we're holding, it's Tazayin Amid Beis, and from the wide lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines from the wide lines, Ve'es Parshandasa. The Megillah lists the 10 sons of Haman who were killed by the Jews in Shushan, right? You remember the pasuk? Let me read it. Ve'es Parshandasa, ve'es Dalfon, ve'es Haspasa, ve'es Perasa, ve'es Hadali, ve'es Haridasa, ve'es Parmashta, ve'es Harisa, ve'es Haride, ve'es Vayizaza, Aseres b'nei Haman ben Amdasa, Tzera Yehudim Hargu, v'abizel shalchu es yada. We have the 10 sons of Haman. The first one is Parshandasa. The last one is Vayizasa. These are the 10 sons of Haman, whom they killed, but they did not take any biza. They did not take any booty from the war. Amr Rabbi de Min Yafu, Rabbi from the city of Yafu said, Aseres b'nei Haman, the names of the 10 sons of Haman. Va'aseres, and the word Aseres after their names, because the pasuk says Ve'es Parshandasa, Ve'es Peiras, Ve'es Dalfin, Ve'es Haspasa, and when it finishes Ve'es Vayizasa, Aseres b'nei Haman. So he says the 10 names of the sons of Haman, and the word Aseres, Tzarich lememrinu b'neshima achas. You need to utter it in one breath. My time, why? Kulu bahadi adadi nafkin nishmasayu. Because all of them, in all of their cases, their souls left simultaneously. They died simultaneously. And because of that, you have to read it in one breath. Rashi says, Aseres b'nei Haman v'aseres, haskala shmoisan v'teva asmucha acharein koloimar, nishmasan naflu ke'echad. You have to say all their names and then the word Aseres, the 10, all in one breath. To say that all the 10, Aseres, all the 10 children of Haman, they died simultaneously. Their souls expired simultaneously. And we represent that how? By saying it in one breath. The word breath, neshima, also comes from the word neshama. The word neshama, soul, is associated with breath because it's the breath that gives oxygen that allows for the neshama. And this is a day to be grateful for the oxygen that we can inhale. And may God help all of our brothers and sisters to recover their lungs, to be able to breathe healthy and well among all good people on the planet. They lost their neshama, their breath, in one shot. So we do it all in one breath and one neshama to represent that their death happened simultaneously. Now you may ask a very simple question, and that is, why is this relevant? And if they died 2 minutes apart from each other? I mean, let's say they were killed together. Fine. 10 sons were killed and they died simultaneously. And what happens if it happened within 5 minutes of a break? Is that so relevant? What does it even mean they died simultaneously? 10 people died in literally the same millisecond? And not only that, even if it happened this way, they all died together. Why do we have to commemorate it? I mean, they're dead. They're dead. They were arch enemies of the Jewish people. They're killed. As they say, every Jewish holiday is they tried to kill us. We won. Now let's go eat. So that's the bottom line. Who cares if it happened simultaneously or not? So I'm going to hold that question for a moment. I'm going to, however, share with you something very interesting, and that is, Tosfos writes here, Tzarich l'omer b'neshima achas, the right column, you see, Tosfos, nira dahainu lechatchila v'b'diavad yatsa. This is only a din lechatchila, but b'diavad, if you didn't do it in one breath, you fulfilled the mitzvah, and this is the halacha in Shulchan Aruch. And in fact, the Ramah writes that in one breath we also say another few words, and that is Chamesh Meis Ish, Ve'es Parshandasav, Ve'es Dalfim, Ve'es Aspasav, Ve'es Paras, Ve'es Adav, Ve'es Pamashta, Ve'es Adisa, Ve'es Adisa, Ve'es Adisa, Ve'es Adisa, Ve'es Adisa, Aseres. We also say the words before, 500 men they killed, and the 10 boys, the 10 sons of Haman, Aseres. We do the words before Chamesh Meis Ish, and the reason is because the Ramah says, because we have a tradition that each one of the children of Haman was a Sar Chamishin. From the 500 people in Shushan whom the Jews killed, they were the real enemies of the Jewish people. Each one of the 10 sons of Haman was in charge over 50 of them. So that's why we add also Chamesh Meis Ish. That's a custom that's brought in the Ramah from the Maharil, one of the greatest Ashkenazic halachic authorities who lived right after the Black Plague, and writes about it. Now here, I want to share with you a very interesting thing. You all know that there are a few psukim in the Megillah that we read loud, right? We all do it loud. Besides the Bal Kaira. Ish Yehudi Haya B'Shushan Abira. Mordechai Yatzim Lefnei HaMelech. La Yehudim Ma'isayir V'Simcha V'Sasim Vikar. The last verse of the Megillah. But there's one more thing we all read loud. What is it? The 10 sons of Haman. Why? Why? I understand we read the verses that represent the glory, the celebration, the miracle, the glory of Mordechai, etc. But why do we have to read the 10 sons of Haman? I mean, we could read the whole thing ourselves. You know, why don't we read about the killing of Vashti? Why don't we read that the Haman was hanged on the tree? That's also very significant. Why is it? I understand the other psukim, but this verse is out of context. Why is the community reading it? So the Rogatchover Gon, Rabbi Yosef Rosen, said a very interesting interpretation, and he says, really, we all have to read the Megillah on Purim. We don't. Why? Because we hear the Megillah. We have a halachic principle called Shemeya Ka'ina. Shemeya Ka'ina means when I listen to you, it's like I am saying the words. Because I'm listening to every word, so you're like speaking on my behalf, and it's like I am saying it. You're saying it in lieu of me, like the Shliach Tzibor, right? They have Chazaras Hashat. There were Jews who didn't know how to daven, so they would listen to the Chazan, and the Chazan would say Shmoyne Esrei, and when I'm listening to you, it's like me saying it. In the olden days, Hallel was the same thing. Not everybody would say Hallel. One person would say Hallel, we would listen. Or like a bracha, right? Sometimes somebody will make a bracha, Boyer Priya Gofen on the wine or on the challah, you listen to it, you said, Amen Shemei Ka'ina. It used to be also a mezuman was that way. Only one person would bench, people would listen to the benching, and it's as though they bench. Today we don't do it because they realized the halachic authorities say that people weren't really listening. ADD set in. So they just said, let everybody bench on their own, even when you make a mezuman. Okay. So the Rakachava says, what does Shemei Ka'ina mean? Shemei Ka'ina means that your words are not only your words, because I'm listening to your words, so it's as though I said the words. The problem is, when it comes to the 10 sons of Haman, you have to do it with one breath. Now, the fact that the Baal Koir is doing it with one breath doesn't mean I'm saying it with one breath. He could be yotzim me in the din of Shemei Ka'ina, but not in the Neshima Achas. The breath he can't give me. The words that I hear, you could say those words that he's saying, it's as though I said it. But the breath, that's not mine, that's his breath. I can't be yotzeh the one breath, that's the problem. I could be yotzeh with the words that he's saying. I hear the words, and it's as though I'm saying those words. But the one breath, that's his one breath, it's not my breath. You could share with somebody words, you can't share with them the breath. So therefore, because these 10 sons have to be said in one neshima, so we have no choice, and we tell the whole community, do it on your own. Do it on your own in one breath, so you could fulfill this, because by listening to the Megillah, you're not going to get this aspect of the breath. You're going to get the aspect of the words, but not the neshima achas. The rest of the Megillah, you don't have to do in one breath. The rest of the Megillah, you don't need one breath. You just have to hear the words. But here, you need the one breath, so therefore everybody does it on their own. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said, Vav de Vayizasa, the Vav of the Vayizasa was the last son of the 10 sons of Haman, Tzarich lemimtecha beskifa. You have to lengthen it. You have to stretch it out in its height. It should be longer. K'mayradia de livros. It should be like the oar of a ship. They would have a long wooden oar, a stick that was used in boats that used to travel in a river that was called Livros. Livros was the name of the river, so they had the oar helping steer the ship. Or as Rashi says that the reason they had this oar was... Not Rashi. Somebody says the reason they had this oar was... Yeah, Rashi does say it. He doesn't say it here. He says it in Masechta Baba Metzia, I know. Rashi says they had this oar, the captain would use this oar because he wanted to, the river was very shallow in a lot of places. So the boat would get stuck on rocks or boulders or other stumbling blocks. So this oar helped him move away, steer away the boat, the ship in this river called Livros, so it can get into the deeper water, not in the shallow water. So whenever they went in a boat in rivers that were more shallow, they put into the water a very long stick, a very long oar, in order to make sure that there's no rocks that are going to obstruct the voyage of this particular ship. So he says the Vav of Vayizasa has to look like that oar. K'mordaya de Livros, like the oar that they use for the river Livros. My timer, because kulu b'chad skif is the kifu. Because all of the children of Haman, whom the Jewish people hung up, were hung together and on one tree. And because they were hung together on one tree, remember, this tree is the tree that Haman made for Mordechai, which was 50 amas. 50 amas would be around 100 feet or 75 feet. So therefore they hung Haman, and then they hung the 10 sons of Haman months later on the same tree, one below the other. Like the Megillah has the order that they were hung, all the way from the bottom higher and higher, all the way till Vayizasa. So Parshan Dasa was the first and then the second, and Vayizasa was on the top, and that's why the Vav of Vayizasa is a long Vav, representing the long tree that had place for everyone, all the sons of Haman, from the oldest till the youngest, from the first till the last. Vayizasa was all the way on the top, and they were all on the same tree. Bechat skif is the kifu, one hanging and on the same tree, and that's the Vav of Vayizasa, the last one. This is how the Marsha explains this Gemara. And the Gemara adds another halacha. Amar Reb Chanina bar Papa, Reb Chanina, the son of Papa, said, Darash Reb Shila ish kvar Tmarta. Reb Shila from the town of Tmarta gave the following exposition. Kol hashiros kula nichtavos ariach al gabe Levaina, or Levaina al gabe ariach. All the songs in Tanakh have to be written a half a brick on a full brick, and a full brick on a half a brick. What does this mean? What this means is that the way they write songs, for example, if you remember how the Sefer Torah writes the Shri in Parshas Beshalach, Oz Yashem Moshe Vnei Yisrael. So the way you have it is, you'll have a line in the center, you'll have a few words in the center, yeah? Space on the right side and on the left side, okay? Space on the right side and left side. But in the middle of the parchment, the middle of the page, you have a few words. And then the next line, you have words on the right column and on the left column, and the center is empty. Okay. The next line, it's the reversed. The center of the column is filled with words, and the right and the left are empty. And then on the next line, again, you have on the right and on the left, and in the middle it's empty. That's what he means. It's written like Aria is a half a brick, which means much smaller in size. Levain is a full brick, which means longer in size. So you have a half a brick on a full brick, and a full brick on a half a brick, which means you're going to have one line where you'll have a half a brick, you'll have words on the right column, words on the left column, and the middle is empty space. But then the next line you're going to have in the middle will be filled with words, okay? And empty space on the right and on the left. And on the next line, you're going to do it again and again and again. So the system is, you have in the middle, on the right and the left is empty, and then in the next line you have in the right and the left, and the middle is empty. And then the next line you have the middle, the right and the left is empty, and etc., etc. So that's what he means. It's Ariach al gabe Levain and Levain al gabe Ariach. That in every single line, you leave space, you leave empty space, which is double the amount of what's written. The written is written, but double amount of that is empty space. Okay, and the written, which is called Ariach, that's like a half a brick in this line, is written on top of the empty space, which is called the brick, because that's much longer. So the written words are called the half a brick because it's less, and the empty space is called the full brick because it's much more. So that's how you have it. In some Gemorahs, they may have a picture. I don't know if you have a picture of it. I know that in some Gemorahs, you may have a picture, but if you know from a Sefer Torah, you can imagine. The truth is, we should have posted an image. But the image is fairly clear. You could look at a Diarrhea of a Sefer Torah, and you could see that the empty space is double the amount of the written space. So you have a line in the middle, empty on the right and on the left, and then the next line on the right and the left it's full, and in the middle it's empty. Besides Chutz Mishir Zu Malchi Knan, this song, this story of the 10 sons of Haman and the list of the kings of Canaan who were killed by Yehoshua ben Nun, this list, it's also a shir, it's also a song because wicked people were defeated. She'ariach al gabe ariach u'levain al gabe levaina. Here it's different. A half a brick on a half a brick, and a whole brick on a whole brick. You remember how the Megillah works? You have basically on one side of the column a list of names, and on the left side of the column a list of names. One on top of the other, and the whole middle is empty. You don't go back and forth where the middle has words, and then the right, and then the left, and then the middle, and then the right, and then left, and the middle. That doesn't work that way. That's all the songs. But in this song, it's two straight lines, and the whole middle is empty. That's what he says. Ariach al gabi ariach. It's a half a brick on a half a brick and a whole brick on a whole brick. Meaning, on the right side you have words. On the left side you have words. That's like a half a brick and a half a brick. But most of it, the middle column, the whole brick, which is more space, is empty. That's what he says. Very interesting distinction between most of the shiras in Tanakh, where you have a half a brick on a whole brick and a whole brick on a half a brick. So basically the way it is that there's always empty space under the words in a regular song, because if you have it in the middle, under that, and the next line is going to be empty, and if you have it on the right or on the left, under it is going to be empty, because the middle is going to be full, and if you have it in the middle, under it is going to be empty, and if you have it on the right or on the left, under that is going to be empty. So it's always a half a brick on a whole brick. There's always emptiness under the words. Here, there's no emptiness under the words. There's emptiness under emptiness and words under words. I hope you understand what I'm talking about. Huh? I don't know if you're going to see, I don't know if you could see this picture. Here in the Art Scroll Gemara, they have a picture. I don't know if you could see it. You probably can't see it. Maybe. This is how it is in the Megillah. This is how it is in the Megillah. Oh, that's the Megillah. Very good. That's the Megillah. The Megillah is line after line after line. Now show us the other one. You have the other one as well? Or you don't? They only show the Megillah? Very good. Can everybody see this, or only I could see it? Everybody could see? You see, very good. Beautiful. Okay. Let me show the chevra who are looking at. I don't know if you could see it here. Let me show you the picture. We'll have to put up an image. I'll put up an image on the source sheets. We'll put up an image. So those who didn't get it, you'll be able to review it. My time, what's the reason? Why is there a change? The reason is we don't want that these wicked people should ever rise again. They shouldn't rise again. You see that they're clogged in. They're stuffed in. There's no place for them to escape. Not from below and not from above. In the other songs, there's other songs are representing the celebration of the Jewish people. So there's so much more space. There's a lot of air to breathe and get out from. That's why it's written and transcribed in that particular way, where there's always empty space under the words. But here we don't want any empty space under the words. We want it to be airtight, mamash airtight. So there should be no Takuma. They shouldn't be able to rise from their defeat. Now, I want to share with you an explanation of the Mahara. Why is it important that they all died simultaneously? And that's why we do it in one breath. So the Mahara says something, it's deep, and it's not so simple to understand. The Mahara is very, very abstract. And it's hard to understand his words, but I'm going to tell you what he says, and let's see if we can understand it at least a little bit. So this is what the Mahara says. Jews had a lot of enemies in history. I'm using a little bit of my own words, but it's all written by the Maharal in Echad. It says the uniqueness of the 10 children of Haman, like their father was, they came from Amalek. And the uniqueness of Amalek is that its hatred to the Jewish people is for one reason. It's not because the Jews took their territory, or because they're jealous of Jewish success, or because they need a scapegoat, or because they're envious, or because they hate the religion that the Jewish people brought. Yes, all that is true and excuses. He says, but there's really one point, and that is they cannot deal with the presence of God. And the Jewish people embody the oneness of God. And their animosity to the Jewish people is that oneness. That oneness that the Jewish people represent, the oneness of Hashem in the world, doesn't allow for their ego. And because it doesn't allow for their ego, therefore they go crazy. And there's nothing the Jew can do about this. You can make 100 tumble sauces. You could do whatever you want to do. They see in the Jew a representation of a truth that as long as the Jew exists, I can't exist. It's like the Gemara says before about the ditch. Haman saw the Jews as a ditch. As long as they're there, he had a void. There was something, a conscience. The Echad, it's the oneness, Hashem Echad. The Jew represents that there's oneness in the world. If there's oneness in the world, your ego is ultimately fake. Because it doesn't really exist. It's part of oneness. It's part of infinity. That separateness is what they need. They cannot tolerate the Echad. That's what the Maharal of Prague says. And therefore, when Amalek is in the world, the Echad will be fought constantly, and it will not be revealed in the world. So he says, when they died, Achdus can emerge, oneness can emerge. And that's the idea that their souls went out, be'echad. It went out simultaneously, in one. And they were hung on one tree. Why? He says the answer is, because the point here is, the Gemara says, Nafkanish Masayu Bahadi Adadi. It happened all in oneness, because their ultimate opposition is to oneness. So when they died, Echad emerges, oneness can emerge. And he says that's the idea of the deep breath, of the one breath that we take. That's the idea of the one tree. And he says a person has two parts, the body and the soul. The body and the soul. So he says their soul went out in one, and their body was hung as one, both in oneness. to bring out basically that everything is really one. Everything is one. Their entire philosophy was to contradict that, to defy that. But ultimately, their death was also one, both in the body and in the soul. And he says that itself defeated them because they cannot deal with that oneness. It's the oneness that kills them. He says, why would their souls leave in one? The answer is because it's God's oneness that ultimately defeated them. And therefore it came out in one moment. It was not divided. And that's why Haman made himself an Avodah Zarah, because the worst thing for Haman was that he is not part of the klal of Hashem. He needs his own klal. He becomes his own entity. And he says 10 of his children, they became their own klal, separate from Hashem Echad, and they here were defeated. This is some of the points that the Maharal says. Now somebody's asking a very, very good question. The question is, the writing of the 10 sons is unequal, unstable columns denoting their wickedness. Hazinu and Kehelis also have unequal, unstable forms of the Shira. In those cases, there's a slight aspect of wickedness also. Hazinu discusses the destruction of the wicked, Kehelis the vicissitudes of growth and decay of this world. So the truth is that you're right. Hazinu was also written this way. Hazinu was written this way, and it could be it's because of what you're saying, because of the Musar in Hazinu. Now, all the other songs are not about the defeat of the Jewish enemies. It's also about the salvation of the Jewish people, like the song by the sea. So that's why you have all the space, which represents freedom. You could breathe, emancipation, liberty, a lot of empty space, because that's what Geula is. You're not, clogged up in exile. But by Megillah Esther, this is discussing just the defeat of the wicked. So therefore we keep it airtight. And in fact, the Jews were not completely saved because they remained in exile. The main salvation was the defeat of Haman, not the salvation of the Jewish people, because they themselves were still in exile. It's that their enemies were defeated. So that's why you write it in this way, which represents the defeat of the wicked, not the salvation of the Jewish people. That's also what the Maharal explains. The king tells Esther that in Shushan, the Jews killed 500 people and the 10 sons of Haman. In other countries, they did a lot. Now, what else would you want? So in the beginning, it looks like he's angry because he gives this whole calculation. Look what they did in Shushan. Really, he was very angry. And the angel came and slapped him on his mouth, meaning didn't let him finish his real sentence, that this is too much. I'm giving the Jews too much power. Instead, he told Esther, yes, you could do what you want. In other words, when you look at the pasuk, it's a little weird because Achashverosh tells Esther, look, you killed 500 people. Look what you did everywhere else. What else do you want? When you hear it, it sounds like, I think you guys had more than enough. At the end of the day, you're Jews. You had more than enough. But at the end, he gives Esther permission to do everything. So that's what the Gemara says. This wasn't so simple. He was really angry. He was not happy with what's going on. He didn't like all this transformation of the Jewish people. But there was this Malach, this higher force that pushed Achashverosh beyond what he would really want to say to give in to Esther's request, which of course is representing that Achashverosh himself was unstable. It's not like he was at peace with all of this. There were conflicting forces in him. The angel here may not mean some mystical angel that flew in from the window and smacked him. Sometimes it means a higher unconscious force inside of you that makes you do things that you yourself don't want to do. That's the story here. The pasuk says, "Ubevoya lefnei hamelech," when she came before the king, Amar im hasefer yashuv machshavte ara shechashav al Yehudim araisha. He said that with the book, the evil scheme on the Jews should be reversed on the head of Haman. Amar, Amrami Bayile. Should have said she said, not he said. When Esther came to the king, she told him that in addition to the book, in addition to the Sefer, you should also kill Haman and his children. She wanted not only Haman dead, but his children and the other enemies dead. Together with the book, together with the edict, they should also reverse the decree completely. Why'd say Amar? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Eloi, she told him, Ye Amar b'peh ma shekasav b'sefer. Let it be said with the mouth what is written in the book. In other words, she asked him to say with his mouth the words that were written in the letter, because he allowed her and Mordechai to write a letter from the king to protect the Jewish people. In order to strengthen it, she asked the king, Amar im ha-sefer, please say it. Don't only let us write it. Let the ministers and the servants of the king hear it from the king's mouth. So Amar, the king, said with his mouth, im ha-sefer, that which she allowed them to write, she wanted him to pronounce with the mouth that they're giving. The king says that the plot of Haman should be reversed on his head. In other words, she wanted it should come from the mouth of the king. Read my lips, because letters are letters, but she wanted it should come from the lips of Achashverosh himself. Rashi says something very interesting. The last Rashi in the first column, he says, Hachi pirusha seder hamikrayos kachu v'kibel haYehudim es asher echelu lasos. The Jews accepted the Yom Tov ki Haman ben Amdasa Hagagi ubevoy lefnei hamelech Amar ima sefer uMordechai kasav aleim sheyasu purim ki Haman bikish la'abdam umashabasa est lefnei hamelech kol ze ya'amer shana b'shana. Rashi is giving a different interpretation, and that is that he erases the word Amralai, and he says that she wanted the Jews should read the Megillah on Purim with their mouth. They should say with their mouth what's written in the Megillah. So this pasuk is not part of the story of the Megillah. It's part of what Mordechai wrote to the Jewish people. If you look in the Megillah, the Jews accepted what Mordechai wrote to them, and he wrote to them that they should read with their mouth what it says in the book. Amar im ha-sefer, together with the sefer, they should actually read it. They should have a Megillah open and they should read it. They should read the story of what happened to Haman. They should read the story about Esther who came to the king. That bevoy lefnei hamelech Amar im ha-sefer. You should read the story of her coming to the king and Haman dying and Haman being defeated. Read all this with your mouth. That is how Rashi interprets it. Ima sefer shetehei Megillah ksuva lifneim b'shas kriyasa. The Megillah should be written in front of you, and you read it from the Megillah. Don't just read a book. Read it from the book. It's a very interesting interpretation. So there's two ways of interpreting the Gemara. One is it's part of the story. She asked the king to say it, or it's part of the mitzvah that Mordechai wanted the Jews to be able to say it. The Gemara says also, Divrei Shalom ve'emes. What's Divrei Shalom ve'emes? Mordechai and Esther sent the Jews the Megillah, and it's called Words of Peace and Truth. Amar Reb Tanchum v'Amrila Amar Reb Asi v'lamet shetzricha sirtut kamitasa shel Torah. From here you learn that the Megillah needs to have lines like the truth of Torah. Meaning in a Sefer Torah you have what's called sirtut. Halacha l'Moshe Missinai is that you take the parchment and you scrape out like little lines so that the writing is eloquent and beautiful and even, because you have like lines that are engraved a little bit, scraped out in the parchment. It's called sirtut. So we learn from here that the Megillah has to have the same halacha. It's called Divrei Shalom ve'emes, words of truth and peace, because Torah is called peace and Torah is called emes. So from here we learn that the Megillah has to have the same halacha of sirtut. You have to scrape out, you scrape the lines, like you engrave little lines, and then it keeps it very even. What's the reason for this? What's the reason? So again, and we'll finish with this, the Maharal. Okay, I lost it here, so we'll have to continue with this tomorrow. I can't. Okay, I'll compliment this tomorrow, Bli Neder. In the meantime, I'm going to wish you all a beautiful day and a healthy day. My love and blessings to all of you. I love you all and bless you with a beautiful, bright day. Happy birthday to you, Rebbe Reuven, once again. I'm going to mention the yahrzeit of one of our dear Chabura members. One of our dear Chabura members, Rebbe Michal Hendler, the yahrzeit of his father today, Matasio ben Elkanah. Stay healthy, and we'll see you, God willing, tomorrow morning. We'll start at 8. Before that, there's a meditation at 7:45 by Reb Moshe Zev Lam. Then we start at 8, and then we'll continue with the Gemara as well. And according to the plan, we'll be able to finish the first chapter, Bli Neder, tomorrow morning. And in the meantime, have an amazing day. Thursday, 4 o'clock p.m., we're going to have our children's program again on the yeshiva.net. Children could text their questions to 845-777-4747. Stay well, and everybody have a lot of hatzlach.
This class is brought to you by the yeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.